York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani is catching some flack on social media amid the latest shooting in New York City.
So on Monday night, police say that an armed gunman walked into an office skyscraper and shot 3 civilians and a police officer dead. Mamdani wrote on X, quote, "I'm heartbroken to learn of this horrific shooting in Midtown, and I'm holding the victims and their families and the NYPD officer in critical condition in my thoughts. Grateful for all of our first responders on the ground."
X users, however, were quick to highlight Mamdani's old tweets about his desire to defund the police. Now, one of these tweets from June 28th, 2020 reads, "We don't need an investigation to know that the NYPD is racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety. What we need is to defund the NYPD, but your deal with New York City Mayor uses budget tricks to keep as many cops as possible on the beat." Another one of these tweets from November 5th, 2020 reads, "Queer liberation means defund the police." In December of 2020, Mamdani even went so far as to call for the NYPD's dismantling.
Mamdani, however, has shifted his stance and has said that he would not defund the police and will work with them. His campaign website reads in part, quote, "Police have a critical role to play, but right now we're relying on them to deal with the failures of our social safety net, which prevents them from doing their actual jobs. Through this new city agency and a whole of government approach, community safety will be prioritized like never before in NYC."
Investigators are identifying the alleged shooter as 27-year-old Shane Tamura. Tamura allegedly stormed into the skyscraper, which houses the Blackstone and also the NFL headquarters, armed with a rifle and opened fire in the lobby. Eventually, police say he took the elevator to the 33rd floor and then allegedly shot and killed one more person and then turned the gun on himself.
Now, the New York Post is reporting that Tamura carried a note that cited the NFL and claimed he had CTE, which is a brain injury tied to head trauma. Classmates say that Tamura, who worked as a security guard, was a standout high school football player but never played professionally. Here's New York City Mayor Eric Adams addressing the situation.
"No words can describe this act of evil, a man who takes the life of others who are innocent. And no words can fill the void that has been left by this tragedy."
So awful thing to happen. Our hearts go out to everyone affected by it. We should continue to investigate and bring updates on the possible motivations. It's being theorized now. We have no idea if this will hold up or end up being the thing, that it was some kind of anti-NFL thing and that he had some concussion-related problem. Don't know. We will obviously continue to look into that. What is, I think, notable, and of course I agree and applaud Mamdani's statement here about the tragedy, but I can't help but bring up, and many conservatives have, or just many people, many New Yorkers, if you read the replies on that statement that Mamdani made, saying, well, just a few years ago, it's not a million years ago, it's not when you were 12, but 5 years ago, I was hosting Rising at the time, it was not that long ago, you said, in no uncertain terms, defund the police, dismantle the NYPD. You want fewer cops. You think cops are the real threat to public safety. You think they're anti-black and anti-queer. I don't even know what that means. That's not his policy now, but it seems a little, I think it's obvious that it's only not his policy because he realizes how unpopular it is. In his heart of hearts, does he actually still want to dismantle the NYPD because he's a leftist? I would guess probably, and yet he's going to be in very likely New York's next mayor.
I think that the slogan was terrible. Defund the police wasn't a good and effective slogan, but I think the messaging of what it was actually calling for, like the leaders who were pushing for legislation were asking for more resources to be allocated to people that actually can deal with mental health crises and things like that, as opposed to police who are responding mostly to, in higher numbers, people of color in the wrong ways because they're not understanding what may or may not have been happening, and especially on the heels of George Floyd, that didn't need to end in death as we saw. And so I think like safety and accountability are not mutually exclusive, right? You can call for both, and that terminology probably needed to change, but the overall messaging that we can still simultaneously bring in people who deal better with communication, intense issues, and work alongside police so they're not also trying to be mental health experts would be a great start for police departments so they're not handling situations that are out of their training realm because they're trained to shoot in danger. But why does the situation lead to danger? Why does somebody who is stealing a cigarette lead to danger for you? Why does somebody who's reaching for a pot in their house that has water in it make you think that you're going to die, right? Is it because the person of color by default is more dangerous to you societally because you don't understand that community, because you don't connect with it? And so these are real questions that need to be answered. And there actually are psychological things that make us differ in other people because we don't experience them on a day-to-day basis. We see it every day with people who, that's not my community, I can't relate to it. It could be a long line of things. Oh, they're homeless, I have a house. Okay, they're black, I'm white, right? So these are real conversations that I think need to be had, and that's what defunding the police actually was meant to mean. It means a reallocation of police funding to some other things that will help us stop being in a situation where people disproportionately of color or in marginalized groups are affected in a negative way with their experiences with police.
I think that's the Lindsey Granger version of what that slogan means, which is inoffensive and give mental health professionals more resources. Sure, I'm all for that. That's not controversial at all. No, I think the leftist activists for whom this was an important slogan meant it in exactly what it means on its face, is that they did not want policing. They think it would be better to have no policing than to have the occasional incidents of police misconduct.
You think they literally didn't want police around them? That doesn't make sense. Like, no one wants no police in their neighborhood.
There's
not
this
one person that would want to go to bed.
No, you're right.
There's no police.
You're right. No real person wants no police. You're absolutely right. If you talk to
and none of the politicians with their children want no police in their neighborhood.
Well, they want police for them because they're rich and they hire private security guards. But they're naive and they think that they don't have encounters in the real world. They don't live in poor areas where there is a lot of crime and where if you talk to the people there, they don't say they want no police. They say they want more effective policing. Now, they feel underserved by the police. They feel like they don't get quality policing. And so they're in a situation where they don't like the quality of police services they get. But it's not that they don't want any policing. They want better police services. Rich, wealthy, champagne socialist type people like Zohran Mamdani, who just had a super expensive wedding, 3-part wedding in Uganda and wherever else, thinks that doesn't have an exposure to how real poor people live, and so thinks that naively that all that crime is just mentally ill people who, if you sent a healthcare provider to go have a nice, friendly conversation with them, then they would stop acting out in some violent way. And that is nonsense.
But that's one
it's
way,
just
but there's
wrong
also
and diluted.
No, the overall conversation is community policing. So that means being involved and connected to the community that you're policing, which a lot of times is not the case. So like, for example, in Camden, New Jersey, which is a really rough area of New Jersey, I went to school in Temple, which is not too far from there. They saw a 42% drop in violent crime after restructuring, which is what that was asking for, the police department to focus on community policing. That means putting in reforms for chokehold bans. That can't happen, right? There's no reason to have that happen. Body cameras being instituted fully throughout the police department. That's important and not being cut off sometimes. Independent investigations. It doesn't require, we know the police officers, even when they're not in a good space, it's the good old boys club. That's like an unspoken word. So sometimes your fellow officer can be wrong. We have to be okay saying that, right? And I know in cancel culture, we might have went too far and every police officer, I have an uncle that was a police officer. I don't think that their police officers are bad wholly, right? That does. I
don't think they're wholly good. They're government employees, and some of them don't do their job well.
So I think that you need to have that training so that you have a connection, or at least spend time in the community, so that you're not just retaliating against everything that's perceived as bad. You're in an area and you're like, oh, that's such a bad community. Maybe start understanding why these children are running outside at 10 o'clock at night. Maybe there's a way to better find opportunities for things for them to do and collaborate with community leaders as opposed to just arresting them all, right? They're still children. Like, I think there's a lot of different things that can be done to try to protect the community before it gets to...
Yeah, there's no arrest needed. But if they're looting CVS or they're smashing cars or hijacking cars or attacking people, then yeah, I would like to see some arrests,
but
and
like,
then
even
you won't have as much
curfew,
of that.
So if a kid's out too late and gets arrested, that's like, okay, maybe there could be more community involvement to make sure that a kid that's outside is not being arrested.
The curfew has been imposed because there have been waves. I can see it. It happens in my neighborhood.
But every one of those young people are not robbing people or doing. Every one of those young people. Some people are just outside because they don't have the right guidance, parenthood, and guidance in their life to stop them from doing that. So if there was more community initiatives, then they would understand, and the police officers would have that connection and be like, okay, let's take your behind home, right?
Yeah, I'm in favor of all those things. In fact, when a lot of those things were shut down during COVID, I predicted that this was going to create great social unrest and crime, because you're right that young people between the ages of like 14 and 20 who live in not perfectly stable social home environments need something to do other than loitering outside 7-Eleven at night, that's where you get crime. You keep those people occupied with after-school programs or sports, school stuff. Jobs are fine. Whatever it is, something that they're just not congregating outside in the summer in the heat, which is how you get bad social adjustment behavior. That's the root of crime in our cities, at least. That's where it comes from. And shutting all that stuff down was just a catastrophic idea that we've only partly recovered from.
So you think we're still feeling the remnants of COVID right now?
For sure. It's impacted our society in ways 100 years from now we'll still be studying the harm we did to young people. But well, I mean that's a side conversation.
We just spend billions on police and hiring and recruiting new police every year without properly giving them the training, or also thinking about how we could spend money on solving issues with housing and
the
other.
The city has a police shortage. And again, this brings me no joy to say this. I do not want to spend more money on anything, as you know. I don't want the government to need more money for anything, whether it's roads or police or emergency services. I don't want to pay more in taxes. I'm like, they get so much money, can't they just make it work? But I have been forced to deal with the reality, which is that there was a massive spike in violent crime in DC and murders a few years ago. It's come down, thank goodness. And I asked people, what are the causes of it, who know more than I did. And there's a bunch of causes. It has a lot to do with how people who have illegal firearms cannot be prosecuted in DC because of the judges have been very bad on this. But also there are not enough, given the size of our city and the number of crime problems, we have fewer police than we used to have, and that's probably a problem. They can't hire them. And that seems like it's a problem. Even though I certainly don't want to live in a police state. I don't want to be surveilled. I wouldn't want me or anyone else to be victims of stop and frisk where they just routinely harass people. No one wants to be hassled or harassed by the police, but something's got to be done. And that we can do it without any policing is just makes no sense. And then a lot of these, the left will talk about more mental health resources, and I'm for that, but that has to have a policing component too. I mean, people like the guy that Daniel Penny killed on the subway, who I forget the name of. He was subjected. Do you know how much money from the city's perspective, from the city's mental health professional services, was spent on him and helping him, and it still didn't work? So the mental health is not some end-all, be-all in all cases.
For sure.
Because people who are suffering from mental health problems and drug problems are unreliable. They stop showing up. They stop taking their antipsychotic medicine. They will not be confined to the housing you give them. It's really a mess trying to deal with these people.
I think to pull up Mamdani's tweets from 2020, it makes no sense in this moment, because this is a nuanced conversation where tensions from all over the globe were high because of what police repeatedly were doing. When you had Sandra Bland, when you had, George Floyd, like we've seen these instances. And when you think about the ratio of people of color in the country, then you're like, why is this happening more often and why is the incarceration rate with people of color so high, given how many people are here? It's not that black people are inherently more bad, right? That's not literally the case. And so that's the kind of society that we create when we police them in a more aggressive way. And that's what we've done. And, if you go to the history of why police officers even exist, right, they were kind of an extension of slave catchers, right? So if we go back to the beginning of time.
Isn't that a myth?
No, it's not a myth. No, it's not a myth. And so I think if you look up why police came about in the beginning, you'll understand that we need to reform the system. And just like I said about Democrats earlier, because I'm equal opportunity when it comes to saying you need to look at what's old that didn't work, there are places you can fix the police system. There are broken parts of our current police system, and there are ways to enhance it. And both parties would benefit greatly from embracing that and figuring out how to work together to better solve this problem, which might include a lot more mental health, which might include officers that actually have a connection to the community, and also might include actually funding police departments in a way that, like DC, needs more officers actually on the ground.
Yeah, I think Mamdani can be held accountable for things he tweeted. It is not like his high school opinion or something, which then we would totally disregard it. It was just a couple years ago. He's an adult. I think he's our age or a little bit older. Or
yeah,
about
and the
our
whole
age.
world was upset about how police were handling people of color in this country.
Okay,
there was a wave.
I do not trust that this is not how he truly feels, and he thinks that, yeah, that'll be better if it was all like a kumbaya liberal socialist thing. And policing
The
for
same
me,
one- the
a
same
wealthy
person-
elite person
'cause
who
look
can
at-
live in a gated community with private security. No policing for you, the underclass.
But the same man who wants to give free access for parents in New York to resources where they have children is the same man who literally wants all those parents to be unsafe in their children. It doesn't make sense. So I think if you sit down and have a conversation with Mamdani, I'm not him, so I can't tell you exactly what the tweet meant. It was like 140 characters. But I do think that there has to be some nuance there, that the same person can't be arguing for these things that sound really good to some of the most vulnerable people who are mothers and women, children that we like to protect in this society, but he also doesn't want them to be safe
I
in
think
their
he was
streets.
either lying then or he was lying now, and I think it's more likely he's lying now. And that what he really believes is his 2020 self. But I'd be happy to be proven wrong. Next up, Democrats are underwater heading into the midterm election season. After the break, the dismal polling numbers and how President Trump measures up. We'll be right back.